All right. So we talking transit. We talking transit up in here. Last week, if you remember, if you were here, if you weren't, I'll give you a little bit of a primer here, but we talked about energy a bit. What gets you energetic? Where are you putting your energy? And we just said, hey, we want to be, as a collective here, putting our energy into the right places, right? And so that's sort of how we talked about things, and we said, basically, the big thing we came to last week is that we're a living system. We're a living system that God is working in, a living system that God is working through to bring His good news to the world. And that's really where our energy is to be placed. And we'll kind of come back to that thought in a moment. And I don't know if I shared with you last week or not, but I'm in a spot in my life where I'm simultaneously really worn out and just energized. So my personality is just one where if I feel like I've got purpose, if I feel like I'm on a mission and a good mission, not just any mission, not just going to the store to get chips, though that is a good mission. Believe you me likey the chip. When I feel like I've got purpose, I feel like I'm on mission, I get energy, big time. And so, even just with the restart of our ministry year, we cranked things up last Thursday, which means, things really were cranking up for me in sort of July. This has just been a period of excitement, fun for me, thinking about, coordinating discipleship groups and restarting everything here and making sure everybody's cool with what we're doing and building these things. It was awesome. So a lot of energy for me in that as well. I started seminary classes last week, and that's been this huge ordeal for me. I won't give you my life story because I'm 35. That would take a while. But it's just been quite the ordeal to go from undergrad many moons ago to finally starting seminary classes last week. And I'm in these classes, and I've had tons of friends go through seminary, by the way, just through church connections and some parachurch organizations that I was involved with in college and afterward. That just to have a ton of friends that are in ministry, several friends that are PhDs teaching in seminaries right now, and so just have gotten to pick their brains through the years, and many of them, not all of them, just kind of moan about this stuff. It's like, oh, that class, just they're so worn out by it, I guess. And at least for me at the very beginning, I'm sitting in these classes and saying, Greek, yes, Greek, yeah. Hawk smash Greek, I don't know. But really just thinking, gosh, I don't know if you have any concept of how long I've wanted to really open the Greek and get it. So I'm sitting in these classes and I'm just soaking it up, loving it. I'm energized right now. I'm cracked out. I am, I'm telling you. And I'm worn out at the same time. I'm busy. We got a 15-month-old who's freaking crazy. She's great. You'll probably meet her sometime. And just it's a fun period of life, though. She's doing new things every day. I don't know if any of y'all would have little nieces or nephews or friends that have rugrats, and they're just in that phase. I went away this weekend to a friend's wedding, and it seemed like by the time I got back, she was like a different person. She's a human being, not just a ball of flesh anymore, and it's amazing. It's energizing. It's really sweet. So, I got energy. I want to put it in the right direction. So this weekend, I was in Minnesota, as they call it. I was in Minneapolis, a good friend, actually a guy who came to faith through this ministry many years back. I was getting married this weekend, and I had the privilege of going up there and being the musician in his wedding, and a whole huge group of us from Atlanta flew up there, and just a sweet time. A whole lot of us that used to be in discipleship groups together and just doing life together years ago. We haven't seen each other in a while. It was sweet. It was life-giving. There was a whole lot of energy going on. And we're standing out in these cornfields, and like, is Ryan in here? No, he's not. He cuts my hair usually. I really need a haircut. And standing out in the middle of cornfields in Minnesota will teach you that, because like within a nanosecond, I go from like smooth coif, right, to like I look homeless. The wind is just, I have kind of thin hair anyway, and it's like wrapped around my nose 8 times, and just, like those things outside of the car dealerships. That's what my hair is doing. It was just ridiculous. So I'm just doing this every like 4 seconds. Like, yeah, guys, sure, it's cool. No, we'll go to the church then. And it was a bit embarrassing. Like when I need a haircut, I always think, sorry, I'm just yakking right now, but I'm not though. I always think that I look really cool if my hair gets longer, and then the reality sets in, and I look like, you know, a 1700s like politician or something. Like my head could be on the side of the New England Patriots helmet. Like just George Washington something or other going on. And it's just, you know, when your hair is all in your face, it's a bit embarrassing. And it's a bit, I don't know, maybe lightly ashamed. Maybe you feel just the slightest bit of like, just look silly, right? Now, something happened actually this weekend that was more embarrassing than that. And it was a little serious. And it was me. When I was given a toast, I said something completely off the cuff. Not off the cuff so much as completely unoffensive probably to any of you. But apparently, to somebody, it hurt. It stung. It felt offensive. And to sort of get that news back is like, oh, really? Like, do I need to go apologize? I gladly apologize. It was embarrassing, you know. I'll admit that one of my idols is absolutely reputation. You know, I don't like the thought of being that guy. You ever been that guy? That gal? Maybe? The vacuum cleaner thing it's a part of the shtick. Don't worry, I'll work it in later. It's not. But seriously, there was some real embarrassment, and again, maybe a little bit of feeling ashamed. You know, going to the reception and thinking, oh gosh, is somebody going to drink a little too much and like corner me? Have you ever seen that? It's fun. You know, just feeling like, oh man, are people in the corner talking smack? Are people saying, there's that guy that said, right? It's a little bit ashamed. Truth be told, my gut, my honest reaction to it is that I would gladly apologize. But my feeling about it was this was an offense because I'm a Christian. It was something assumed about me and about our group from here at Perimeter. That because we were Christians, we must be blank. Because we were Christians, we must be jerks. Thus, you know, just a nonsense, innocent comment gets interpreted through that lens. My gut was, this is baby persecution. Baby persecution, tiny little bit. This is a tiny bit of feeling the reality of John 15. You know, if they hated the teacher. They're going to hate the follower. So that's going to set us up a little bit for this evening. We're a living system that God is working in, that God is working through to bring a message that sometimes isn't really popular. That sometimes just being associated with it offends somebody at a wedding reception and you aren't even saying anything about it. Sometimes. And so we're going to dive in tonight a little bit and talk about how. Because let's be honest, most of us are skittish, right? Most of us have at least a little bit in our hearts that's like, ugh. If Garrett he wasn't even talking about the gospel and somebody got ticked off at him at a wedding reception, what are they going to say to me, when I'm at work and I take a stand for my faith? What are they going to say about me when I'm hanging around some folks that that don't love Jesus, that are going in directions that I can't go there with you guys and love you, but I can't, right? How do we deal with that? How do we walk forward saying, yeah, we're a transit system for the gospel, man. That sounds good in this room, but how do we walk out there with it in a way that is both faithful and on the other side, it is humble and attractive. Two guys that I really love that come at things from a very different angle say a similar thing. So Tim Keller, who's the pastor of Redeemer Pres up in Manhattan, and then Louis Giglio, pastor of Passion City Church down here in Atlanta. They both say the same thing. They've said it at different occasions. They said, we will never do an evangelism training seminar. I heard them both say that at different times. And they just essentially won't talk about the how. Now, I love both those guys. I tend to disagree with that. But I'm going to pull two things, one from each one of them, that I think are super helpful in terms of how. They say they're not going to train us, but I think they actually are. So let me give you this first thought, and this is really, really simple. And this is something I heard from Tim Keller, and I thought, man, I just want to pass that along to you. It's this: don't hide who you are. Don't hide who you are. That's the essence of doing evangelism. Just don't hide who you really are. Romans 1:16 will be sort of the main thing we look at tonight. If you were here last week, you remember we looked in 1 Corinthians, and we looked at a passage that has a really similar phrase to this. 1 Corinthians says, hey, the message of the cross, or the gospel, is folly, basically, to the world, but it's the power of God to us, to those who are being saved. And so we centered in on that for a moment. We talked about the power of God, how the gospel really is everything. Romans 1:16 says a very similar phrase. It talks about the power of God, but it says this just a little differently, doesn't it? It says, I'm not ashamed of the gospel, for it's the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, the Jew first, also to the Greek, meaning all of us, essentially. Not ashamed of the gospel. I'm not ashamed of what, essentially? What's it mean to say I'm not ashamed of this? I think it's essentially coming back to what Keller said, not hiding. I'm not ashamed of who I am now. I'm not ashamed of what he's done. This is different than you got to stand up for God, man. Like this Facebook post. Right? That's different. It's not the same thing. This is different than, hey, you got to stand up for God and, tell everybody that lives a little differently than you or thinks a little differently than you how wrong they are. That's not what this is saying. It's not what this is saying at all. It's not stand up for God. It's show off his grace. Show off his grace. Show off what he's done for you and in you. Who you are now. Don't hide it. Think of it this way. Does the gospel have anything to do with the way that you make decisions? Does the gospel have anything to do with your values? Does the gospel have anything to do with how you spend your time? Does the gospel have anything to do with who you would date, who you would marry, perhaps? It should. It absolutely should. Again, the gospel is more than just this message of how we enter the kingdom. And I think one thing that illustrates that fairly well for me is that there are several phrases, several places where the phrase obey the gospel or some form of that is used in the New Testament. And so they're tiny. Romans 10:16, 2 Thessalonians 1:8, 1 Peter 4:17, if you want to look that up, if you're interested in where that phrase happens and what it means. In context, it's talking about people that are not of us, and it says that they were not obeying, not obedient to the gospel. And essentially that, in that context, means that they were not believing the message of Jesus, believing the message of his lordship, of his salvation, just as a free gift to them. But it also means a little more than that. And to obey the gospel means applying the reality of all that Christ has done for us to every little part of our lives. Right? Allowing the gospel light to shine on the dark corners. To go into every little space of who we are and say, you're Lord. You get to dictate what happens here, right? You get to dictate what happens in my dating relationship. You get to dictate what happens when I turn on my computer. You get to dictate what happens when I'm in a conversation and the subject goes in the direction of someone I'm not very fond of. You get to dictate what happens here. That's really what it means to say obey the gospel. It means to allow the implications of his love for us to flow through everything. So does the gospel have something to do with your decision making? Of course. Of course. Does your relationship with God have something to do with how you make decisions? Where are you going to live? Who are you going to room with? You going to try to room with believers because you want to be encouraged? Or are you going to try to spend time around people that don't know Jesus so that you can be a light? Are you going to spend all your time in the basement on video games? Are you going to spend your time more wisely than that? Right? Are you going to pursue someone just because they're hot? Are you going to pursue someone because of the spiritual depth you see that Christ has done in them? I mean, these are just a few of the myriad ways that the gospel affects everything. Everything, right? if we're honest. So if it affects everything, then we talk about it, right? I mean, anytime the word obedience comes up, it might make us a little cringe a little, right? 20s, 30s, we want to be autonomous, our own person. I don't want to obey nothing. Unfortunately, that's probably true about my heart. We obey what we love. You obey what you love. It doesn't even have to be an authority figure. If you love something or someone, you will obey. You will live according to its dictates. Right? It will happen. And if you love something, you will speak about it. You always speak about what you love. You always speak about what you love. So don't hide. Right? Don't hide in your relationships, in your friendships, in your work relationships. I know for a long time we had several folks that were involved in tennis leagues around here. Tennis leagues were big in Atlanta for a really long time. And, at your tennis league, if you do that, don't hide who you are. Don't hide who you are. And that sort of leads me to the other thought from Louis, who also says he would never train anybody on how to do evangelism. He says this: he won't do it because you already know how. You already know how to evangelize. You buy it? Or does it feel like, no, I need to go through Randy's thing one more time. I just got to get that, memorize the diagrams. And the diagrams are good. Do the diagrams. You don't have to, but, they're good. But do you buy it? Do you buy this? You already know how to evangelize. I promise he's right. Again, what do you love? What do you love? For a long time, it was a big deal to be an Apple fanboy. I'm not sure that that's going to be the case anymore. But do you love your iPhone? Right? Do you talk about it? Do you love that new restaurant that opened up down the street? Do you tell everybody about it? Like, oh, you've got to try this. And this particular dish, that's what I had. And it blew my mind open. It was amazing. Don't you do that? Whether it's a restaurant or not. Don't you do that with the thing that you love? You're a hairstylist. I don't know. Ryan Van Kirk, for example. I'm telling you, that man can wash your hair like nobody's business. I always walk out of there just like, it's officially the weirdest thing I've ever said up here. Are you a music nut? Are you a techie? Are you a baseball fiend? Like, what do you love? Don't you talk about it? Of course you do. You know how to do evangelism. You know how to do evangelism. Don't hide who you are. Don't hide who you are. And remember this. Just like I said earlier, there's a difference between what our culture has been, what Christian culture has been pumping up for years and years. Take a stand for Jesus, which sounds and seems an awful lot like just be conservative. I'm cool with being conservative. If you're conservative, that's great. But there's a difference between that and the reality of not hiding who you are, showing off His grace. That's different, isn't it? It just sounds different. There's a difference. There's a difference between being a loudmouth and what I think Jesus actually calls us to. There are a couple of verses that make me think, God promises to use our little offerings, right? Our little things that we think don't amount to much. Gosh, I'm just doing my job. I'm just having a nice conversation with somebody and being kind to them. I think God promises to use these things. Look at these couple verses. 1 Thessalonians 4:11 first says this: And this is so not popular with Gen X, Gen Y, Millennial, Gen Z. I don't know what the heck is happening anymore, but this is not a popular verse to talk about. But it's in the Bible, so read it. Aspire to live quietly. Man, doesn't that grate against our cultural need to be epic? Aspire to live quietly and to mind your own affairs and to work with your hands as we instructed you, so that you may walk properly before outsiders and be dependent on no one. A simple, quiet life. All right. Colossians 3:23 says this: whatever you do, work heartily, as for the Lord and not for men. I look at those couple verses. I think just in the way that we're called to live our lives, in the way that we're called to do our jobs, whatever those might be. Hey, whatever you're doing, wherever you are right now, the job might stink. You can move on. That's okay. But as long as you're there, do it really well. Do it with all you got. Do it as unto the Lord, right? And aspire to be that person in the office or in your family or in your friend group or your tennis league, I don't know. Wherever you are, that people say, man, I want to know more about them, right? Aspire to live quietly. That doesn't mean never speak, right? Not only never speak literally, but it doesn't mean never speak the gospel. Not at all. It's more in terms of the attitude that we're to have, the attitude that we're to bring to bear wherever we are. Because we always want to remember, especially here, especially as we're talking about being a transit system for the gospel, it's clear that I think, man, the gospel should be all over everything we do. Should be all over everything we do as we work and do our best, as we live quietly, as we serve, and as we speak. I never want us to lose sight of a verse you've probably heard many, many, many times, Matthew 28, 19 in particular. Make disciples. Make disciples. Whew, that's big. Make disciples of all nations, anybody, everybody, right? Don't cut somebody off from the grace of God, from the best news they'll ever encounter just because you don't think they'd probably be interested in this, right? All nations, everybody, baptizing them, just meaning bringing them into the community. It means more than that, but we'll give it the abridged version for now. That they would receive the sign of Christ's union to them. And really important, teaching them. Make disciples means to make students. Make students of Christ Jesus. Teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. Right? So we're to speak it. It's a really clear part of who we are to be together, this living system that we talked about. We said last week, Ephesians 4:12, we're all in ministry. We're all in ministry. Some have gifts that are for training God's people, but all of us are in ministry together. And what that means is that we're in the ministry of reconciliation. We are in the ministry of bringing people to hear about him. You know, this Ephesians 4 is talking about the body. And there are a whole bunch of different images that God uses to talk about what we are as the church. We're a bride, he says. We're a city. We're a body, and we all need each other. We're all in ministry together. And what we've said is we're using this little picture of a transit system to drill down into that just a little bit and say we're a living system, bringing those who have not heard, bringing the good news to those who have not heard, and bringing those who have not heard to hear. So there's a back and forth, right? There's a back and forth. We're bringing folks even into situations where they will encounter the goodness of God through his people, through various opportunities. I'll come back to this. Some will despise you for this. That's just life. Some will despise you for being a Georgia fan. It's okay, TC. You'll hit some persecution, right? Our brothers and sisters in Iraq and Syria are facing the real deal right now, you know. But you hit some of this. If they hated him, some will hate us, for sure. Like the 1 Corinthians passage said, hey, this is folly to the world. The message of the cross is nonsense. You know, but you're never going to win. As long as you're his, you're never going to find that perfect balance of, now do you like me? Oh, do you like me now? No? Okay. Yeah, following Christ is always going to be, at the same time, too narrow and too wide. It's always going to be, seriously, you think the way is Jesus? Like, so you can be the cruddiest person on the planet and just pray a prayer and poof, you're in heaven, right? You're always going to hear that. It's always going to be too narrow, that's too wide. It's always going to be too wide for some people. Say, no matter how bad you are, Jesus' grace still applies. It's always going to be too narrow for some as well. That's just the reality of the gospel. It's just the reality of the good news. But I bring us back to this. If it's the power of God, it's everything. It's everything. If it's everything, if he's your everything, he won't be able to shut up. Hopefully we'll be wise. Hopefully we'll aspire to live quiet lives, and God will use it. The gospel is everything. He is your life. Don't hide. Let me pray.